Good evening and welcome to Africa Today Focus. We begin tonight with breaking news regarding the recent summit in Nairobi.
When a nation reaches a moment like this, a moment where the streets grow tense, where conversations become whispers, and where people look at each other, wondering what truly happened behind the closed doors of power, then it becomes impossible to pretend that everything is normal. Pooh. What Tanzania has felt in these past days is not simply political disagreement. It is something deeper. An uneasiness spreading through the hearts of ordinary citizens who only want fairness, transparency, and a voice that cannot be ignored. And when a society begins to feel that its voice is slipping out of its hands, that the truth is drifting further away instead of coming closer, then unrest becomes a natural reaction. Not because people seek chaos, but because they seek clarity. You can walk through markets, pass through villages, visit the homes of elders, speak to youth in crowded neighborhoods. You will hear the same questions repeated again and again. What happened? And why does it feel as if the answers are being pushed further away instead of brought into the light? This is the emotional landscape of a nation shaken, not by violence alone, not by disputes alone, but by uncertainty. Uncertainty is the true earthquake that rattles a society from within because it makes people question whether the path forward is being protected or being altered in ways they cannot see. In moments like this, leaders must understand that silence, no matter how strategic it may seem, only amplifies the demand for truth. People do not want complicated statements, long speeches, or political maneuvering. They want sincerity. They want to feel that those in power hear their concerns, understand their frustrations, and respect the weight of their fear. When election-related chaos emerges, regardless of its origin or intent, it leaves a mark not only on the political system, but on the psychological well-being of the people who depend on that system to protect their future. And so when news of a petition being filed externally, whether to a domestic authority or an international body, enters public conversation, it does not just raise legal questions. It raises emotional ones. It becomes, for many citizens, not a judgment of guilt or innocence, but a symbol of how far their concerns have reached. It becomes a sign that the demand for answers is no longer quiet, no longer local, no longer contained. This symbolism is what shakes the nation more powerfully than any single allegation ever could. The world must understand that Tanzanians are not reacting simply because of the complexities of politics. They are reacting because they love their country, because they want to protect the value of their vote, because they want their children to grow up in a nation where leadership is not something distant and untouchable, but something accountable and grounded in the will of the people. The unrest is not the cry of destruction. It is the cry of ownership, a nation trying to claim its right to truth. In times like these, it becomes essential to speak honestly about the emotions of the people without assigning blame or declaring conclusions. A shaken nation does not need more accusations. It needs guidance, reassurance, and a path forward that honors the dignity of its citizens. People want to believe that their concerns matter. They want to believe that no voice is too small, no complaint too insignificant, no fear too minor. When leaders acknowledge this, they bridge the gap between authority and citizen. When they ignore it, that gap becomes a canyon. What Tanzania is experiencing today is not the end of its journey, but a moment of awakening, a moment where the people are saying, clearly and courageously, that they will not accept uncertainty as the foundation of their democracy. They want answers. They want transparency. And above all, they want peace built on truth, not silence. When we look deeper into the unfolding crisis, one truth becomes painfully clear. The real danger is not only in the accusations themselves, but in the cracks they expose within the nation. A country does not tremble merely because someone files a petition abroad. It trembles because its own internal foundations have been weakened over time by decisions that were never addressed, voices that were never heard, or tensions that were allowed to grow quietly in the shadows. And what we are witnessing now in Tanzania is exactly that. A moment where long-buried frustrations have found a trigger strong enough to break the... It is not the ICC petition by itself that shakes a nation. It is the feeling among the people that justice has been delayed, denied, or selectively applied. That feeling is the true earthquake. People do not rise in concern unless they believe something is deeply wrong. Communities do not whisper anxiously unless they sense that power is drifting away from accountability. And citizens do not watch global headlines with worry, unless they fear that their leaders have pushed the nation toward a dangerous crossroads. What we are witnessing now, in the streets, in the markets, in the voices of ordinary Tanzanians, is a collective questioning. A moment where the people are quietly asking whether the path they were placed on was ever truly chosen by them. That question alone carries weight heavy enough to shake any government, any president, any seat of authority, no matter how firmly they believe themselves rooted. This moment exposes a deeper wound that election chaos often hides. The simple truth that leadership must be earned every day, not claimed once every few years. When a leader drifts too far from the pulse of the people, when decisions are made behind closed doors rather than in the light, trust does not collapse all at once. It erodes slowly, silently, until the smallest spark becomes enough to ignite national frustration. And today, the ICC petition has become that spark. Whether the accusations stand or fall in international courts is one matter. But the fact that the people themselves feel compelled to look outside their borders for justice, that should concern every leader who still believes in the sovereignty and dignity of their nation. Because a nation's strength does not lie in the power of its institutions alone. It lies in the belief of its citizens that those institutions will protect them, not suppress them. When the people begin to doubt that promise, they step back. They distance themselves emotionally from the state, and they start viewing leadership not as guardians, but as obstacles. And once that emotional separation begins, it takes far more than speeches or promises to mend it. It takes humility, honesty, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. This is the crossroads Tanzania finds itself at today. A moment where leadership can choose to acknowledge the concerns of the people or attempt to silence them. A moment where the government can either interpret the petition as an attack or as a warning sign, a call to reevaluate, to listen, to reconnect. Because history has taught us again and again, nations do not crumble from external pressure. They crumble when leaders refuse to listen to their own people. And Tanzania stands on that edge now, not because of the IC, not because of politics, but because trust, a nation's most valuable asset, has been stretched thin by repeated tension. If Tanzania is shaking today, it is not merely from accusation. It is from awakening. A people demanding transparency, demanding fairness, demanding leadership that reflects their will rather than their fear. And if the government truly wishes to stabilize the nation, it must understand that the path forward does not lie in dismissing the petition. It lies in answering the questions that created it. And now, we must confront the most uncomfortable part of this entire moment, the question of what comes next. Because once a nation reaches a point where petitions are filed internationally, where the people speak in worried undertones, where trust in institutions has been shaken, there is no going back to the way things were. A country cannot simply rewind. It must choose a direction. And that direction will decide whether this crisis becomes the beginning of collapse or the beginning of renewal. What happens next will reveal the true character of leadership and the true strength of the people. In moments like these, a nation looks to its leaders not for defiance or denial, but for clarity, for reassurance, for a sense that someone at the helm still understands the weight of responsibility. Tanzanians need to hear, not from spokesmen, not from distant offices, but from their president herself, an acknowledgement that the unrest, the accusations, and the rising fears are not happening in a vacuum. They are happening because something has gone wrong, because the nation feels unheard, because the social contract has been strained. If leadership chooses to confront this moment with honesty rather than defensiveness, the entire tone of the crisis could shift. People don't demand perfection from their leaders. They demand sincerity, fairness, and the courage to correct mistakes. But if the leadership chooses the opposite path, if it chooses to dismiss the people's concerns, to frame every criticism as foreign interference, to rely on power instead of legitimacy, then the nation will descend into a cycle that has destroyed many others across the continent. A cycle where silence is enforced, where justice becomes selective, where elections become rituals without meaning. And when that cycle begins, it does not end with one leader or one administration. It becomes woven into the state itself. That is the future Tanzanians fear. That is the future these current tensions are warning against. Yet even in this moment of uncertainty, there is a possibility. Yes, a real possibility. That Tanzania can transform this crisis into a turning point. If the government takes this petition not as an attack but as a reflection of the people's anxieties, if it chooses to investigate electoral concerns transparently, if it opens space for dialogue, then Tanzania can emerge stronger, more stable, more unified. So, a crisis only becomes a threat when leaders refuse to confront the reality it exposes. But when a crisis is used as a mirror, as a moment of national self-examination, it becomes a catalyst for progress. The international community will be watching. Yes. The IC will proceed with its own processes, yes. But ultimately, the destiny of Tanzania will not be decided in The Hague. It will be decided in Dar es Salaam, in Dodoma, in the towns and villages where citizens are wondering whether their voices matter. The petition may have sparked the moment, but the path forward lies in domestic action, conducted with transparency, accountability, and humility. The government must recognize that the world's attention is not a punishment. It is an opportunity to show that Tanzania is capable of confronting difficult truths with maturity and national pride. And the people, too, have a role. Their voice is the foundation of this moment. Their pressure, their courage to speak, their refusal to remain silent. This is what keeps a nation alive. A population that demands justice is not a threat to the state. It is the lifeline of the state. When citizens insist on fairness, they are not weakening Tanzania. They are strengthening it. They are reminding the leadership that power without accountability is a path to chaos. But leadership rooted in the will of the people is unbreakable. So as Tanzania stands at this crossroads, the question is no longer whether the nation is shaking. The question is what it will build from this shaking. Will it build fear or will it build reform? Will it build walls or will it build trust? In the end, every nation is defined not by its moments of calm, but by how it responds to its moments of crisis. And this moment, right here, will determine the Tanzania of tomorrow.